Alright, this is me attempting to explain how to increase content discovery and like general engagement on Nostr. So this is a multi-pronged approach. I would say there's no single solution to this, and it's just a matter of tackling different areas to get to a desired outcome. So for one, I think the problem is kind of twofold, or actually more than twofold. We have an overwhelming amount of Bitcoin content compared to other type of content. So I would say, and this is like me just speaking anecdotally. I don't have any data to support any of this, and I could be wrong. But it's just my kind of judgment based on what I see day to day, month to month. And I would say that there's an overwhelming amount of Bitcoin content, and not as much of the other type of content. So we have a tagging problem of being able to surface that kind of content. And the obvious problem is as well is that we don't have algorithms to do all this for us, right? So maybe after Will implements whatever the underlying framework that he's working on, he said it'll be easier to do personalized algorithms. So I think that would be a huge plus in terms of discovery. But even before we get there, I think there's some things that we can do. So one way that we discover content currently is hashtags. But hashtags, they're a little bit difficult to surface. They have a chance of being abused. You can see people spamming just a bunch of hashtags just to show their stuff, right? And hashtags they're easy to forget to tag things. Like you can write a note, you can just forget to include hashtags. I do it all the time. I'll write design related notes, and I'll forget to include Nostr design in there. So that's a problem. And then the other thing is like when you onboard, some clients are doing it somewhat decently. I think Primal has some hashtag recommendations, but it's like kind of limited. You can't see all the hashtags to follow. It's just a lot of work to try to scroll through everything to see what's there, right? So the approach that I'm recommending is kind of going to be, I would say, multi-directional. There's at least 5 different aspects to it, maybe more. This is just what I've come up in like the last 10 minutes just thinking about this. So yeah, the first thing, I'm on the Nostr design file here, and I'm actually redesigning the onboarding here. But the first thing I would look at is just surfacing different hashtags. And the way that I'm thinking about it is instead of doing like individual hashtags lookups, what we would do is we would basically do curation, at least initially on the user's behalf, and define like a set of topics that might have sufficient hashtags in them as a group of hashtags basically. So since we don't have actual topics, algorithmic topics, what we could do in theory, and I don't know if this would work, this is just my kind of designer take, right? So you have to consider the actual development of this. But one thing we could do is just group a bunch of hashtags that exist into topics, and we would basically recommend topics in the onboarding, perhaps like so. And we could do like really generalized topics. They don't have to be super niche down. So like we could do life, nature, science, photography, sports, whatever, right? So it'd be really like top level topics that you would see. Perhaps some of the biggest subreddits or something that would politics would be one of them if you really wanted to do politics. Oh, who's in here? Somebody's interrupting my my video. Okay, who's that? So yeah, hashtags grouped into topics. I think if we could even like hard code it initially, I know like the person hearing this will say, "Oh no, hard code, don't do that," right? But what we could do is just allow users to opt out of that stuff on the back end. Like once they log in, they can just unfollow hashtags. So yeah, it would be kind of hacky to get them into discover some content, but also give them the options to not follow it, right? Just unfollow the hashtags, like untoggle everything if they don't want to. So I think that's one part of it. Along with discovering hashtags, I think we need better tagging mechanisms right now, and we just don't have that. And the obvious solution would be not to tag anything, and just be able to look up notes based on just the words that are in them. But that's kind of tricky, and that requires a little bit of kind of AI machine learning thinking. And there is a developer who's working on this or has tried to work on it. but it's pricey. Basically, you have to use ChatGPT 4 to classify notes, and I've seen some of the classifications, and they're not all that accurate, I would say. And it's just a lot of work. It's expensive. I'm not sure that's going to be possible. A data vending machine, DVM, might be a solution to this. I do not know how that would work yet, but that could be one thing to do. But in the meantime, since we don't have any of that yet, what we could do is something really simple. When you enter something like a note, when you start typing it, maybe there's just another input either below or within the same field that's kind of nested that prompts some tags, right? Like it just says tags, enter some hashtags, right? It'd be just a simple nudge, basically, that to get people to tag their content. And I know for me personally, it'll be super helpful because I always forget to tag things. And if I see a field that says tags, I'm more inclined to actually include some tags in it. If we wanted to get a little bit more advanced than that, what we could do is find a way to pull hashtags out of notes. That would be a little bit more advanced. I'm not sure how that would work. I have a feeling that's possible. It's kind of how the tag fields are generated in blogs when you create a post, right? Sometimes there's automated kind of tags that are generated, so maybe there's something we could do with that. But that'll be up to developer skill set and their ability to do that. If they could do that, that'd be awesome. Another thing that I was thinking about, I guess I didn't mention initially, is like users. When you surface users in the onboarding, instead of surfacing all the Bitcoin stuff, we could just surface like trending users. Another thing that we can do on this step as well is instead of just users, we could surface lists. Lister is a client that's used to create lists, and there's already some good lists in there. For example, there are some RSS feeds for different types of news. That would be one way to keep in touch, at least with the news side of things, right? People miss news sometimes. They get addicted. Like, I collected feedback one time, and a bunch of people said, I need the news. So I go to Twitter for that, or X. So that's one way, is to introduce lists in here. So you could have a list for a list of designers talking about design, right? You can have a list for photographers. You can have a list of news RSS feeds. Like, there's all these ways to integrate lists that we could possibly surface in onboarding. Another way to kind of get people into safe space without seeing all the crypto stuff, maybe even just not seeing Bitcoin stuff, because it is really Bitcoin centric here. The way that I look at it is like we're possibly suffocating users with Bitcoin content. And yes, we love Bitcoin, right? Everybody loves Bitcoin here. But perhaps if we just let users have their own, what I call safe space, but it's just like Bitcoin free space or crypto free space or porn free space, whatever, right? Anything that they don't want to see, maybe even politics. And one way that I see of doing that is kind of, again, hacky and kind of hard-coded, but basically to create mute lists. And this is why I started the bounty for mute lists. I think Damos is working on that right now. But mute, right now some clients have basically like a dumb version of this, like a mute word, and you have to enter them manually, like in Snort. But what we could do is create mute lists. And these lists could be like a central repository. We could share them. We could not share them if we don't want to. But basically, you would have a toggle in the onboarding to opt out all the stuff that people may not want to see, with the option to easily toggle it back on, or to even edit the list, or to add their own additional lists. So for example, in this example here, I have hate speech, derogatory, NSFW, crypto, Bitcoin, politics, and you could, whatever, you could, this is just me brainstorming for a few minutes, right? But we could add other types of things or remove things, whatever we want to do. The great part of this is that you can still opt out of all this stuff, right? It just gives user flexibility in what kind of content they want to see. I know personally for me, I get a little bit tired of seeing all the Bitcoin stuff because I've been around in the space for so long. Like, all the things that people get excited about, I don't get as excited about because I've already heard it a million times. So for me, it's actually nice not to hear Bitcoin stuff, not because I don't like it, but because I'm just tired and bored of it. Like, yeah, I love it, and of course there's never enough that you can learn in Bitcoin, right? It's like a never-ending rabbit hole. But just think about it from an average user's perspective. Maybe they don't want to see that, and maybe we should just give them an option to do that, right? And and I know that it's inevitable that eventually they'll discover Bitcoin. Eventually they'll ask about Zaps. They'll ask about Lightning. People are gonna talk about this stuff no matter what, and no amount of mute words in the list or number of lists is gonna help that. It's always gonna get by, right? So this is kind of a really hacky way of just sort of clean up the feed, make it manageable without all this extra topics, but still give a lot of flexibility, and you're still gonna run into Bitcoin stuff, right? I think it's gonna be inevitable. So yeah, that's one way of doing it. I've talked about lists. Of course, we can also add lists to the the main navigation UI, right? Not navigation, but like the client UI. And this is what I'm kind of exploring now. I'll get back to hashtags as well here. Let me see if I do. Where's my list stuff? Okay, here. So in this example, with this is like a snort with 3-column layout. Lists are right in the navigation, and this is basically, yeah, it kind of copies Twitter, but Twitter is brilliant. A lot of things that Twitter did is actually really genius if you inspect it deeply. And I know this won't apply to Damus as easily because it is a mobile client, but making things accessible with fewer clicks, and this kind of navigation, lists are just one click away. So in this example, like I could click on lists and I could automatically like follow all these people who might be talking about things that are interesting to me, right? Freedom Tech, news, streamers. So there's a good chance if I follow streamers, I'm going to see stream content. I might see stream talk, right? Talking about streaming technology, whatever it may be, right? So just bringing things to the surface a little bit more, having fewer things to click, I think is a good way of doing it. And also user curation. So in here you can see, I don't know, I'll zoom in on my video. I have designers and it has 8,000 AK saves. So this is basically a way to know which lists are great, and we could rank lists based on how many times they've been saved. Yes, you can follow them, but yes, you can also not follow them and just save them to your own lists. Next time you go to lists, you'll see your favorited lists in here, and I don't think I've designed the favorited. Perhaps this will say saved already. This button state will change to saved, and that's one way to have users kind of curate the content, and let other people benefit from that curation, right? Have user curated content. All right. I wanted to get back to this screen. So this is kind of like a combined feed, and from the technical perspective, I don't know how complicated this is. So in terms of snore design, what I typically do is I just design whatever the heck I want, and sometimes it's like minor things, like, yeah, we can do this, and sometimes like, this is way out there, right? We're probably not going to do this, and that's okay to me. Like, I like exploring ideas. I like to put wild things out there, and if they work, great. If not, that's fine. So in this feed, as you can see, we're on the notes tab, and we have notes here. Hashtags are automatically surfaced, and that way you don't have to click on the hashtag to see the notes in that hashtag. Again, from technical perspective, I'm not sure how feasible this is, but if anybody's watching this and you're like, oh yeah, I can make hashtags work in my main feed, that's one way to do it, right? So here, I wouldn't even have to click anywhere, like a drop down. Right now, all the hashtag stuff in Snore is in drop down. So if you follow hashtag in Snore right now, you have to use the drop down to select it. But if we did this, we may have a way. Although I realize this doesn't really make sense here. Like, you're following, and there's hashtags. So there's some things to think through here. But if you could surface hashtags right within the main feed, and also just have them like clearly labeled, so you can see like which hashtag you're browsing under now. Although you may just scroll past and not see it, but that's one way to do things. And again, we could also try to show like how many people are following that hashtag. That's another way of kind of curation. It's not curation, it's more like social proof. But with social proof, we can show like how many people are following this hashtag to see if it's interesting, right? that basically motivates people to, I think, slightly at least, to post content under those hashtags. Because they see that other people are reading that, perhaps in the back of their mind they'll be like, oh yeah, um, people like this hashtag, I follow it. Maybe I have some content I can contribute to it. That's another thing they can do, right? Trending people, this stuff, popular hashtags, we could surface popular hashtags, and I think for that you just count the number of nodes under those hashtags, and do that. Again, if we had communities implemented, I realize not every client is gonna do that. I'm not even sure if Snort is gonna do that. I just kind of added it here. But if you had communities, that's also another way to surface additional content just to keep people busy. But yeah, this is all just content surfacing, and I want to touch on one more thing before I end it here. This is kind of going long-winded, and this is something I started working on just today, and it's a kind of wild thing. I think Damas may be actually pursuing some of this. But yeah, this is kind of unpolished, very rough kind of mind map here, and that's the idea of a guided progression basically. And I stole all this from video games. I used to play a lot of MMORPGs online back in the days. MMORPGs, yeah, that's already in the name, right? Online. But in pretty much every MMO, there's like a progression, and you typically unlock something like levels, badges, quests, whatever that may be. And I'm borrowing all the same concepts, or just stealing them, and I'm calling it Snort Codex. Again, I don't know how implementable this is, but the thing is, we have badges, right? And badges have for a long time been kind of useless. There were some hype around badges, but for the most part, they're just kind of fell flat. Some people still use them. I know there's a couple games that create badges. But what we could do with badges is, badges work best when they're issued by somebody with authority. And in this case, Snort is like the authority, right? Because people are using this client. That's what they're used to. In Damas's case, it'll be Damas who issues the badges. So I think the key is that it has to be somebody who has some kind of authority. There's some value of achieving that badge, right? It's not freely given to anybody for any reason. And I think that's the benefit and the key, that it must meet that criteria. Another criteria that I think all badges must meet is that they must be available to everybody. There should be no way that the badge is there that you cannot achieve unless it's specific to something like, I'll use an example of World of Warcraft that I used to play back in the day, is you'd have class-specific badges. But that's okay because like you're locked into a class. Like you could be a hunter, a warlock, whatever, a mage, but you're locked into the class, and you had class-specific badges. But in Nostr, we're not really locked into anything, so maybe it doesn't make sense to have any badges that are not aligned with something that's not general. So in this, you might be reading some of the stuff as I'm talking. I'm playing off with the concept of snort as in a drug context, like snort cocaine. And here I'm kind of going to the mafia terminology. We got the Zap boss, Zap father, right? But you could have different levels of progression. And I basically use ChatGPT for most of the stuff. Like I outlined 10 levels. You start off as an initiate. You get courier, muscle, accountant, lieutenant, second in command, advisor, field leader, chief, and then mastermind. I made all these gender neutral for a reason, right? Don't want to get canceled. And as you achieve these different things, the key component of this is being able to actually verify it. Technically, if this is possible, some things you may not be able to verify. Some things you may have to like just mark off as, yeah, I've done this, and kind of not cheat. But if you cheated, you could. It's not ideal if you cheat, but I imagine on some of these you could cheat very easily. But that's not kind of the point, right? The point is to guide people through various concepts, educate them about Nostr, educate them about Snort, the client, educate them about various concepts like zaps, relays. And here's where I break it down, right? I've got concepts, discovery, skin in the game, habits, zaps, supporter, basically anything that we want people to do, we can encourage it with progression, badges, and ranks. This is the ranking system, right? You start off as initiate, you have a progress bar. As soon as you complete these 4 things in this example, right? There may be more. I'm still brainstorming these. Your initiate bar goes boop, 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 levels up, you become a courier. But I think it'd be a fun way to not only like engage with Nostr, You can see here, for example, I have introduce yourself with hello Nostr hashtag, or follow at least 20 people, right? Add a new relay to your list. Watch a 50-second video about how relays work. I would have to produce that video myself. I'm not sure if we have a 50-second video. Follow at least one hashtag. See, so we're basically using gamification to encourage discovery, progression, just growing as a user, contact with other members, participation. And with all this, we can add streaks, all kinds of things, right? And of course, people may not use this. They may ignore it. The gamification may fail. A lot of times, gamification doesn't work if the thing that you're trying to gamify sucks in the first place. So there's kind of like a lot of trial and error. But I think if we combine all these concepts with all the other things I mentioned, onboarding, hashtag assistance, muting lists, achievements, and content surfacing within the client, I think we can do a lot to push users in the right direction, and to even like form communities around clients, around specific brands. We don't need to call ourselves Nostr everything. In fact, we could like eliminate half the Nostr talk. We could just talk about clients and build client brands. And that way every brand is resilient on their own terms. So I think there's a lot of strength in all these things. And I'm spilling a lot of beans on some of these things I wasn't going to share right away, especially this stuff. And I don't know how dumb it is. But this is going to be a lot of work. First, I have to define all these things, right? Then I have to define all the ranks. I have to see which steps make most sense in each rank, right? So here we can see we go to muscle, which is like rank 3, and you get tail 3. Tail like as in follow somebody, right? So we have 100 people that you're following. That not only helps you discover content, helps you discover new users, helps you stay active, but yeah, you also level up here. And I think last thing, maybe I said last thing last time, but I think it's really important that we build some healthy habits in clients. I know for us personally, we don't need those habits because we're all addicted to Nostr now. But in people who are new, who may be prone to dropping off fairly quickly, what we can do is we can design tasks via the progression mechanism that I just described that encourage them to use the client. So it may be like 3-day streak of notes. Like if you post notes 3 times in a row, three days in a row, 1 month in a row, 3 months. Like we could do anything we want. I think at 3 months mark is safe to say you might be safe. We could do like, let's see, note streaks. So yeah, we could do just notes without streaks, right? So if you just post 10 notes, you'll be a rebel. If you post 100 notes, you might be a postaholic. Feed Flutter, I call it 1,000 notes. We can do the same with replies. We can encourage conversation. If you replied, let's say, from the technical perspective, I'm not sure if you can count replies separate from kind 1 notes. Maybe you can. I don't know. Maybe Will or whoever, the genius developers, will figure this out. But if you, let's say it's possible, then you could see like how many times people reply, and you can encourage people replying, right? If they want this achievement of reply agent or talk broker, like they'd have to reply 25 times, 100 times. If they want to be a catalyst, they'd have to reply 1,000 times. So that encourages conversation between people, right? And this is just literally, I think like 30 minutes of brainstorming today. I'm sure much smarter people out there will think of better things and proper order in which things need to be discovered. Yeah. And then again, it could all be a failure, right? If these things are difficult to track and difficult to issue badges, that's another thing to consider, is how difficult would it be to automatically issue badges by, let's say, Damus or Snort. Like, is it even possible to issue badges automatically? That's a huge question. If it's not, then maybe this whole plan is junk and we just throw it out. But yeah, this can go in so many directions. You could tie these achievements to physical benefits, kind of like a unofficial Nostr NFT. I'm gonna get canceled for saying NFT. But we could technically tie these achievements to in real life benefits. I don't know what those would be. Maybe like unlocking special merch. Let's say you're selling merch in Damus, and you have like the merch store, and then you have the exclusive merch store that it's there, but nobody can buy it unless they carry this rank or achievement, right? But that's kind of getting wild. I think all the other things that we can do are much more practical. Alright, I'll stop it here for whoever was watching. Thanks for watching 25 minutes. Bye.